Well, good morning, everyone. Happy Friday morning to you. Welcome back to Now TV and Morning Musings. My name is Don K. Preston. I'm the president of Preterist Research Institute of Ardmore, Oklahoma. We are continuing our examination of the appointed time and its relationship with the challenge of Christ. I've got to share something with you. I mean, this has been absolutely hilarious in a way. In another way, it's extremely sad that people who claim to be good Bible students can be so myopic, so atomistic, I use the term, ignorant, and I'm not trying to be pejorative, I'm not trying to be insulting, but it's just one of those type of things where you shake your head. Now, Jesus said, here's the challenge of Christ. If I do not do the works which my Father has given me, do not believe me. John 10:37. This has been the premise, the foundation of our study over 2 years now. Well, there's one individual, he basically stalks me at different times on Facebook. And I'll answer him. I will refute everything that he says. So he'll literally disappear for days and weeks, even months. And then he'll come back thinking evidently that I have forgotten what he said and what I had said. He evidently doesn't understand that I copy and paste everything of our discussion. And so just recently, he posted a question. Actually, this goes back into January of this year, of 2023. And he says, well, Preston, what are you going to do? You say Jesus had to do everything that the Father gave him to do. And you say that includes the second coming, the judgment, the resurrection. Well, what are you going to do with John chapter 17, verse 4? In which Jesus, immediately before his crucifixion, his passion, and obviously before his resurrection, Jesus said in his prayer to the Father, which is a high priestly prayer, Jesus said, Father, I have done all that you have given me to do. So he says, hey, Preston, did Jesus mean what he said? And I have to confess that when I read that question, that quote argument the very first time, I was going, you can't be serious. You claim to be a knowledgeable Bible student, and you would ask such a question. Now you have to understand that the motivation for that question is to rule out the second coming, judgment, resurrection as things that the Father gave Jesus to do. So if you can eliminate second coming, judgment, resurrection from the things that the Father gave Jesus to do, then the challenge of Christ is moot, isn't it? So here he is asking the question, well, did Jesus tell the truth when he said, I have done all that you have given me to do? Well, let's see here. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 14 says, Christ was manifested in the flesh to destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil. Now, remember, Jesus came into the Father or into the world to do the will of his Father. And he said, of myself I can do nothing. John chapter 5, 21 and following. But that which the Father has given me to do. John chapter 12. And so here we have Jesus, and it is said of him, he came to destroy him who had the power of death, that is the devil. So I ask this individual, did Jesus destroy the devil at his first coming? Had he destroyed the devil before John chapter 7 so that allowed him to say, Father, I have done everything that you've given me to do. And 1 John chapter 3 directly corollary passage, Jesus said, or John wrote, we know that he was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. Well, what are the works of the devil? They're the works of the flesh. Fornication, adultery, lying, lasciviousness, and on and on and on. It goes. Galatians chapter 5, 19 and following, the works of the flesh. We know that he was manifested to destroy the works of the devil. So I asked this young guy, had Jesus, prior to his death, destroyed the works of the devil? Now look, you can just go through the Gospels, you can go through the epistles, and you can find one statement after another as to the work which the Father gave him to do, which no one believes that he had already done those things prior to John chapter 17. Another example, I've just got to give this. Matthew chapter 5, 17 and 18. Do not think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. Okay, so I asked this guy, had Jesus, before his death, fulfilled all of the law and the prophets? You know what he gave me? Luke 18, 30 and 31, and Luke 24, 44 and following, where Jesus said, when I was with you, I told you it was necessary, this is Luke 24, that all things that are written in the law and the prophets and the Psalms be fulfilled. Okay, that's great. Did he fulfill everything in the law, the Psalms, and the prophets before John chapter 17? And naturally, this guy absolutely refused to answer the questions. He said, this is just your standard practice. When you're asked a question, you won't answer yes and no. Well, of course, you have to understand, he was asking a wife-beating question. Now, what's a wife-beating question? If I were to come to you, and let's say your name is John, and I say, hey, John, have you stopped beating your wife yet? Or, hey, John, have you gotten off of cocaine and marijuana and speed and meth and all that kind of stuff? Have you stopped taking that stuff? And you go, what? What are you talking about? No, and you go, no. Answer my question, yes or no. Don't go off into this tirade and what are you talking about? Just answer the question, yes or no. Well, you see, it's a trick question. And in this case, this individual's question is based upon ignorance. Pure, unadulterated ignorance. Jesus had fulfilled the incarnate mission by this time, all except his death, burial, and resurrection. This individual knows that. But you see, he's so desperate to find some argument, any kind of an argument, against covenant eschatology, that he's willing to take a passage completely, totally out of its context, ignore all of the passages that have a bearing on his question, and simply say, well, Preston, you won't answer my question. Well, I answered the question. I answered the question with book, chapter, and verse by pointing out that his understanding of John chapter 17 is totally misguided, totally ill-informed, totally myopic, totally atomistic, totally ignorant. You see, folks, we don't develop a theology strictly to answer someone else. And that's exactly what he's trying to do. Because like I said, he knows that Jesus had not fulfilled all the law before John 17. He knows Jesus had not destroyed the devil prior to John 17. He knows Jesus had not destroyed the works of the devil prior to John 17. But he knows that to answer that question, to answer his own question, destroys the point of his question. Okay, I just had to share that with you. So let's get back to the issue of the challenge of Christ and the appointed time. You know, folks, and by the way, thank you so very, very much for all of the wonderful comments on YouTube. I truly, truly appreciate it. Even some of you who've objected, and offered some kind of an objection, no valid objections, but nonetheless, thank you for watching the videos. Okay, remember, Revelation chapter 1, verse 3 tells us that the appointed time has come. Well, appointed time for what? Pardon me. The appointed time for the fulfillment of the last days prophecies. Because as we have seen over and over again, tiny bit of refreshment, the Old Testament prophets knew that what they were predicting for the last days was not for their day, and they did not even understand the manner of the fulfillment. Now look, folks, this is absolutely critical. We have atheists and skeptics, and by the way, it appears at this particular point, as I'm filming this morning, that my debate with Mr. Mark Smith, a man who says he was a member and a preacher in the Churches of Christ for several years, who could not reconcile Jesus' predictions of his coming judgment, resurrection for the first century with the time statements, and so he became an atheist. It looks like that debate is going to take place. But you see, ladies and gentlemen, men such as Mr. Smith have never even tried to come to grips with the fact that Peter said the Old Testament prophets did not understand the manner of the fulfillment of their prophecies. Mr. Smith's approach to those prophecies was, the Old Testament said new heaven, new earth going to come. We're still in the same old heaven and earth. Therefore, the prophets were wrong. The Old Testament prophets said the Lord was going to come in power and glory, in judgment, in resurrection. Well, I look around. I didn't see Jesus come on the clouds with fire, with the angels and a shout, and destroy heaven and earth. I didn't see that happen. Nobody else saw it happen. But you see, this destroys Mr. Smith and the rest of the atheists, skeptics, Jews, Muslims, etc. If the Bible says what it means what it says, and all of these statements about the coming of the Lord, judgment, and resurrection, then why did the Old Testament prophets have to search diligently to understand the manner of the fulfillment of their prophecies? After all, coming on the clouds means coming on the clouds, right? Coming with fire. I know what fire is. You see, this is another example of a myopic approach to the Scriptures. It refuses to allow the Bible to speak metaphorically, figuratively, spiritually, non-literally. Because the skeptic says, I know what Jesus meant when he said, the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father with his angels and judge every man. I know what that means. It's got to be literal. Well, then you're simply manifesting your ignorance of Hebraic thought and Hebraic literature. I don't want to be unkind at all. I don't mean to be disrespectful of anyone. I'm just simply pointing out, when you approach Scripture from a Western, Hellenized, literalistic perspective, you are going to misinterpret the Bible. So, what we have is the New Testament writers telling us, the Old Testament writers spoke of what was going to happen in the last days, the appointed time of the end. But even the Old Testament writers said they did not understand, they didn't know exactly when the last days were going to come. They knew it was not for their day. They didn't know when the last days were. New Testament writers said it was for their day. Not only that, the New Testament writers said they were living in the appointed time of the last days. So we have been focusing in on Daniel chapter 9. We've looked at Daniel chapter 2, which talked about the fourth world empire, and in the days of the kings of the fourth empire, days of Rome, the God of heaven would set up a kingdom. Well, Jesus came in the days of Rome and said the kingdom of heaven is drawn near. We have examined Daniel chapter 7. Once again, 4 kingdoms, and in the days of that fourth empire, the God of heaven would come and destroy the persecuting power. Jesus came in judgment of Israel, the persecuting power, and he did it in the days of Rome. He came in the likeness of the Father. That is to say, the Father had come many, many, many times before in judgment by using this nation to judge that nation. Jesus said the Son of Man will come in the glory of the Father, like the Father has come. He's living at the time appointed by the prophets. He said the time is fulfilled. The appointed time is fulfilled. He's living in the time of fulfillment. Now, obvious atheists say, well, but the prophecies failed. Well, let's see, Daniel's clear about when the time would be, fourth empire. Daniel 7 is clear, fourth empire. And then we come, as we have shown, to Daniel chapter 9. I've said all that to lead us back to Daniel chapter 9. Daniel 9 is one of the clearest. Is it controversial? Oh, absolutely. The dispensationalists chop it up and insert 2,000 years between the 69th and the 70th week, which has no support whatsoever from the text, that is based upon a presuppositional false concept about the nature of the kingdom. You see, with all due respect, my friends, dispensationalists have the same misguided hermeneutic, literalistic hermeneutic, that the first century Jews did, who had been Hellenized, by the way. They were expecting a physical kingdom, a physical king on a physical throne to destroy the Romans. All you got to do is read any of the first century Jewish literature. You know exactly and precisely what that is what they were expecting. Jesus categorically rejected that kind of a kingdom. He refused to be that kind of a king. The time was nonetheless right for the kingdom. So we have in Daniel chapter 9 a prophecy of the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9. And in that 70 weeks, and we are told in Daniel chapter 9, 70 weeks are determined. That word determined means cut out. Here's the stream of time, and God looked down through the stream of time and said, from here to here, that is the determined, appointed time. And he said it was the appointed time to accomplish 6 constituent elements. Now, don't forget, folks, I have produced a 19-lesson series, DVD presentations, on when did the 70 weeks of Daniel chapter 9 end, or will it end? Nothing else like it that I'm aware of anywhere. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. We've made it very affordable in a download format. You can also purchase it on DVD disc, or strictly MP3s at a reduced price. Point of fact is, you're not going to find this material anywhere else. Okay, I got to hurry here. So, we've already looked at the concept. 70 weeks are determined to put away sin. Okay. Now once, the writer of Hebrews says, now once at the end of the ages, the Greek term there is suntelia to aionion, at the full consummation of the ages. By the way, I just got to point this out. I won't take much time on this, but this is so incredible. All futurist eschatology says we're still looking for the consummation, the full end of the ages. The end of time. The end of the Christian age. No, Christ appeared at the full consummation of the ages. the time for the fulfillment of everything foretold in the previous ages, more specifically, the previous age, had arrived in the first century. Paul said, 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 11, I've written some articles on this. They're on my website, donkpreston.com. The end of the ages has come upon us. 1 Corinthians 10, verse 11. Folks, this is incredible. Not one futurist eschatology honors that. Because you know what they say? Well, okay, Paul says the goal of the previous ages has come upon us, but not really. We're still looking for the true goal. We're still looking for the real end. Well, I wrote a book on this entitled 80-70, A Shadow of the Real End, because you see, we're told constantly. Yeah, AD 70 was a type or a shadow of the real end of the age, the end of the world this time. Folks, in this book, I adduce 15 reasons why that claim is absolutely false. Not a shred of biblical evidence to support it. Go to my website, donkpreston.com, BibleProphecy.com. Order this book, 80-70, A Shadow of the Real End. Send me a note that says you saw the offer on YouTube or Facebook. And if you order this in the continental U.S., I'll refund your shipping. Okay? Save yourself $5. And unfortunately, we're going to have to go up on shipping here before long because the shipping rates have gone up. Okay, got to get back to it. So we've looked at the fact at the end of the ages, Christ appeared to do what? To put away sin. Well, okay. Is that related to Daniel chapter 9? If not, why not? Remember, Jesus said the time is fulfilled. He knew what time it was. And yet we're told, God doesn't think in time like man. But Jesus certainly did. And Jesus, as a man, said the time is fulfilled. Was he wrong? Not only did Jesus appear to put away sin in fulfillment of Daniel chapter 9, and remember, folks, he did not accomplish it at the time of the cross. He initiated the promise, initiated the fulfillment of the promise through his death, no question about it. Nobody's arguing about that. But the application of the power of his death would come into parousia. Romans 11, 25-27. Hebrews chapter 9, verse 28. Ephesians 1, verse 7, verse 12. Ephesians 4:30. Don't have time to go into those. But the point of fact is, it was a process of fulfillment that began with John the Baptizer, through Jesus' ministry, empowered by his death, burial, and resurrection, to be consummated and fulfilled at his parousia. That is proven by the next point that we want to examine about the appointed time of the end. 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement. Very, very quick point here. We are told that Daniel chapter 9 is all about the time of Antiochus Epiphanes. And Antiochus Epiphanes, he desecrated the temple, desecrated the altar, but the Jews under the Maccabees were able to destroy his forces, recapture Jerusalem, purify the temple, purify the altar, and supposedly make the atonement. But there's a huge problem with this, ladies and gentlemen. In approximately 168, 167, somewhere along in there, Onias, the high priest, who is considered by the Jews as one of the very, very last of the divinely appointed priests, the properly genealogically confirmed high priest, was killed by Jason and Menelaus. They took over the priesthood. Now look, according to Jewish law, no man that was a murderer could be a high priest. Okay, so when Antiochus conquered the city, desecrated the temple, appointed Jason and Menelaus, one overtook the other, etc. That meant that no atonement could be made by them, either one of them. They are not proper priests. Okay, then we are told that with the reconquering of the temple and the purging of the altar, that the atonement was made. Well, here's the problem. The high priest that was appointed at that time was not considered to be a legitimate high priest. John Hyrcanus, for instance, who followed along, was not a genealogically purified high priest. And by the way, he was a killer. He had shed blood, and no man who had shed blood could be a high priest. So they can appoint him all they want. He was not qualified. So the question is this. If you're going to say that Daniel chapter 9 and the promise that 70 weeks are determined to make the atonement applied to the time of Antiochus Epiphanes, you've got to answer the question, how could two murderers, Jason and Menelaus, how could they make the atonement? Well, they couldn't because they're murderers. Secondly, how could you even argue that even though the Maccabees reconquered the temple, purified the altar, how could you say that the proper atonement was made by them when they too were guilty of shedding blood, which disqualified them from being priests? You see, Daniel's talking about making the atonement. You had to have a good priest to do that. The time of Antiochus Epiphanes did not qualify, and I'm out of time. We're going to pick this up next week. See you then.